Good morning. It is Thursday, September 3rd, time for the morning live stream. I'm Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a business attorney in Clark, New Jersey. I handle contracts and transactions and states and trusts and probate and all the like. I do not go to court. I'm also the host of The Accidental Entrepreneur. Please find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon is releasing a new big directory soon as well. So subscribe, listen to our episodes, hear the people that I interview who help small businesses, who are entrepreneurs themselves, who are inventors, authors, social media influencers, share their ideas and hopefully help you get a hold of your business. If you go to the website, you can subscribe to our email list to be notified of anything that's going on, including podcast episodes. Episodes come out every Tuesday and Friday. And definitely get on the list and find out what's going on because we got some really interesting guests coming up in the next couple of weeks, some well-known authors and some very impressive stories. Got some collaborations coming up with some other podcasts where we're going to do some collaborative things. And also watch for a video series that I'm a part of that's coming out starting in about a week or two called Business Talk After Hours. So today I was going to talk about, I wasn't really sure what I was going to talk about, but I want to stick with some legal topics. So let's talk about partnership divorce, business separation. What do you do if you're, and I'm working on, half a dozen of them right now. What do you do when your partner comes in the middle of the pandemic? They're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not coming back to the clothing store and running it with you. I don't want to be part of the diner anymore. Whatever it happens to be, I want out. And what do you do in those situations? Now, unfortunately, a lot of small business owners don't have a plan in writing signed by you and your partner or partners as to what you do in these kind of contingencies. They're called buy-sell agreements generally, and they cover things like voluntary termination, which is exactly what that is. You voluntarily want to quit the business, you want to retire, you want to move on, or you have involuntary termination. Maybe there's a creditor involved or your partner's in the middle of a divorce or something like that. Somebody's trying to grab value from the business. There is death of a partner. And there's when a partner becomes disabled and is no longer able to come back and work for the business. So, what do you do in those situations? Well, I can tell you that what you should do now, if you're getting along with your partners and everything's going fine, is that you should start putting contingency plans in place. Um, Contact me, or if you have your own counsel, and set up a meeting via Zoom if you don't want to get together and have a discussion about those issues. Now, just because you have an operating agreement, that operating agreement may address the issue of what happens to your shares if you die. It goes to your heirs and your representatives deal with it, but it doesn't deal with the succession of the business. And are you in business now with your partner's spouse or children or whatever it happens to be? And there are countless stories where partners end up in business with surviving spouses or surviving children, and it really wreaks havoc on the business, usually destroys the business. So if you want to survive an event like that, you should put written plans in place, signed by both parties, agreed to, values agreed to, payouts agreed to, maybe an insured agreement. Very often those things, at least from a death buyout standpoint, they're insured with life insurance. There is disability type of insurance for buyout purposes, and business overhead expense to keep a business going. There's certainly income continuation if you become disabled. When does the business continue to pay you, and at what point can you no longer come back to the business, and then the business starts to buy you out? And if those things aren't addressed ahead of time, it becomes a problem because the family wants a certain amount of value, and you're like, well, I don't even have your time and efforts and work to come into work every day. I got to replace you. So what's the value? Okay. That's the planning side. That's what you should be doing if you have a business. Even if it's a newer business, at least address those issues with your partner. Maybe if something happens, you don't get any value right now, but maybe in 3 years you do, and you tier it. I've done agreements where there were many scenarios. If the person left in 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, and what would happen to their book of business, depending on the business that they were in. I have done valuations that varied between if someone died versus if they're disabled or if they wanted to walk away. So those are kind of issues that have to be fleshed out in a well-written agreement. And, it's a $3,000 to $5,000 investment, maybe more, depending on how the attorney charges and the time that's involved. But usually when you start these things out and they're simple, they get more complicated as you're talking with each other. Well, I didn't really think about that. Well, what happens if I want to walk away? And you get into these difficulties, but those difficulties you want to address when you are getting along, when everything's going well, when you care about each other, when you want to have a good result for the both of you. If you sit down and start writing out all these things, and let's say you're a fairly young business, and you don't want to go down the whole road of opening up the whole can of worms. You need an agreement, a basic agreement that it's going to address the basics, get some life insurance in place, and God forbid, in the early days, at least if something happens, somebody gets some value and you guys can walk away and move on. If you go to my website, and I'll put a link in the comments, I have a basic buy-sell agreement available for more than, I think it's, less than half of what I normally charge. That if you need an agreement, you're working with your financial advisor, you're placing insurance, you can do an agreement and you'll have something in 72 hours or so to execute. And it's a basic agreement with what's called a certificate of value in the back. You can change the values over time and initial them and so forth. So that's always I wouldn't say it's a poor man's approach, but it's a simple approach to at least get you started. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, especially for financial advisors that are watching this. If you have a client and you're putting insurance in place, often what happens is you get the partners examined, and you got the insurance pending there, and then they want a buy-sell agreement. The insurance company wants an agreement. So you need something, and that's a good way to do it, to get the insurance in place, because it doesn't work for anybody if people die and the insurance is not in place. Also, I see a lot of situations where people just go buy insurance on each other without an agreement, and they just have the insurance payable to each other. Now, that can work, but just be aware that there are a lot of tax traps when it comes to life insurance and how it's treated under the law. There's all kinds of rules that could make the life insurance proceeds income taxable, which doesn't help anybody. So you want to make sure that you do it right. You don't just buy insurance, have the company own it, payable to this person, and it's like no big deal. There are a lot of rules that insurance professionals know about. Most lay people, most business owners are not aware of them at all. They don't really apply in family situations where you're leaving insurance to your spouse or to your children, but business situations, it can become taxable. So be aware of that. Now, let's get to the situation that's a little bit more complicated. You come into work one day during the pandemic, you're starting to open, partner comes in and says, you know what, I can't do this. I'm afraid to come back to work. I'm afraid to be near our customers. I'm afraid I'm going to get sick. I'm not coming back to work anymore. And what do? You have nothing in writing. You haven't had evaluation of the business, and you got a little bit of a problem. So I'm not going to give you a simple solution to that. The solution is that the remaining partner is going to feel that the business is worth very little because they don't have the other person's labor to help them. They got to probably hire somebody to replace that person, which is true. Profits may go down and are inconsistent. You're coming out of the pandemic. You don't know what's going to happen with the business, and the person's leaving you in the lurch. The person who wants out of the business, it's going to do some valuation online, go to a business broker, talk to other colleagues that they know, and come up with a valuation that's on the other side that they think the business is worth. They want their value. If this something like this went to court, and everybody knows I don't litigate, but if you are filing what's called a partition action, which is basically saying, listen, I want this business to be separated and liquidated. The liquidation value of a small business that's just lost one or two of its partners and has basically, I don't know, inventory and maybe lease obligations is not going to be worth much. So for the partner who doesn't have anything writing and wants out, just be aware that you're going to have trouble getting the value out of the business that you want. The partner who's staying kind of holds the cards, especially if it's not a specialized business where the partner could go to the landlord and say, hey, listen, I'll negotiate a new lease. I'm starting a new company, and we're going to start a new name and get started. Then there's arguments about, who owns the name, who owns anything that the business has created from a marketing standpoint. Maybe there were, materials that were, put out there. Maybe you're in some sort of a publishing business. So there's books and things, digital copies of things, and, who owns what. If you don't have any of that stuff, trademarks, maybe patents, you don't have any of that stuff in writing, it's going to be a bit of a mess. And that's going to all figure into this. And maybe there's a lease And maybe in the lease, you're both personally obligated. It's very common that a landlord for a small business will require a personal guarantee. And now you're both obligated. So you want to walk away from the business and leave your partner with the lease and everything. The landlord, first of all, might not be willing to release you. I've had that situation where the landlord says, listen, I got two of you on the hook. I'm not giving up one of you. And, then what do? You ask your partner to indemnify you if there's a problem and they don't want to do that. So that's why you can see that all this stuff needs to be fleshed out ahead of time when you have joint obligations and joint responsibilities and value that you'd like to get out of your hard-earned business. But a lot of small businesses don't have value. So lesson for today, I talk about wills. I talk about, I think last week, all kinds of agreements that you need to run your business, right? Agreements with your customers, agreements with your vendors, agreements with your partner, like an operating agreement. How do you operate the business? Well, one of the other pieces to the operating agreement is a buy-sell agreement that says, listen, at what point do I have to sell and what point do you get to buy, or vice versa? If you're a minority partner, you want things in there like, because maybe you don't have full control of the business because your other partners own 70% of they ultimately make the final decision. Yet if they're going to sell the business, that first of all, that they make sure they bring you along. They don't sell 70% of the business and leave you as a partner with the new guy, and the new guy doesn't care, and you get stuck. We call those tag-along rights, meaning you get to go with the sale of the business. Same thing if you're the 70% partner. You don't want the 30% partner saying, hey, I'm not helping with this. And the buyer says, well, if your partner is not on board, then I'm not buying the business. Those are called drag-along rights, where you're dragging along the minority partner to make sure you can sell the business. All these things need to be addressed in a well-written, well-thought-out agreement, and an agreement that you probably revisit every year or two. Just take it off the shelf, make sure you know what it says, see if there's any new issues, anything you got to address. Does it coordinate with your operating agreement? Does it conflict with anything? And so on and so forth. It's all about running a business, having systems in place, having documentation in place, having mechanisms in place that deal with contingencies. Life doesn't happen in a straight line. I've probably said that before. There's bumps and bruises along the way. Things are going great, and then you come in one day and the news says there's a pandemic coming and everybody's got to go home for 4 months. You're like, what? So, planning, a lot of people don't do it. They get involved in their business. They're always putting out fires. It's hard to stay organized. Everybody has a different kind of system of a methodology to teach you to how to stay organized and how to stay stop on things. But it's an ongoing process. So at the beginning of April, I had my 5-day business challenge. Many of you completed the challenge and got to work on your business plans. That was just the beginning. It was basically a 4-part template. So that 4-part template should eventually evolve into like 4 different binders. One that's an operations manual, one that's strategic planning and marketing, one's that's financials and projections, and one maybe that's product development, services, so forth. And all those things should contain processes. So if a key employee leaves and goes out and doesn't really help you, or dies, God forbid, and can't teach the new employees what to do, you have it in writing in a book, and somebody can pick it up and start reading it and figure out what's going on. Even when you implement systems, if you listen to, we're going to start talking about that on the video roundtable, about the implementation of systems to run your business. Well, those systems have to support the people that are in the business. A lot of people put in systems and expect the employees to just jump in and know everything that's going on. Well, sometimes you got to do it the other way around, figure out what the employees need and put these things in place. So all this stuff comes down to making your business successful, having it in writing, being able to deal with these kind of contingencies. People die. I mean, you come into work one day and you get a call and your partner had an accident on the way to work, or he had a heart attack and he died. Well, life goes on. You have a family. He has a family. What do you do? And when you're doing your buy-sell planning, make sure your wills are done too. Both of your wills are coordinated, and follow with what your buy-sell agreement says, that the will's coordinated with regard to the disposal of the share of your business and how it continues. We call that succession planning. How do you plan for the business to succeed and continue after someone leaves or dies or becomes disabled or so forth? So I don't want to belabor the point. I think everybody understands. But if you have a business, now, if you are a solopreneur, a sole practitioner, That doesn't mean that you can't monetize the value of your business. Maybe you have a competitor, a colleague who's in the business, and you guys make joint. Now, you wouldn't do this for, if you want to walk away, but it may be an option. And if you died, maybe your friend takes over the business, and you set up an agreement where you buy each other's business. You put insurance in place. It's almost like a cross purchase of either person's business. It allows your spouse to monetize some value out of your business, and allows your colleague to maybe grow his business, and benefit a little bit from all your hard work. So there are creative ways to do it if you don't have a partner. Very often you can explore these issues with your financial advisor. Most of these guys are very well schooled in the business markets when it comes to the business planning that involves using insurance products. I mentioned disability products, disability buyout, business overhead expense, and certainly life insurance. They'll know how to set it up. They have people at their insurance companies that know how to set it up with. They have attorneys on staff that help. Now, they won't draft the agreements for you. You need me to do that. But I work with these insurance companies all the time, and the attorneys and how they want beneficiary designation set up properly. There's a lot of moving parts, but you need to address it. And that's a good place to start. So today's live stream, actually, I think today was one of the longest ones I've done. It's Thursday, September 8th. I'm Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a business attorney. If you want to learn more about my practice and get in touch with me, you can text law to 21,000. That is the digital business card. They're one of our sponsors of the podcast. You can, on any of our emails and the podcast website as well, you can learn about the digital business card and get it for your own business. It's a great way to connect with people. And the age of coronavirus, when nobody's going to touch your business card in the future, you're going to need a digital format for it. This creates a landing page for all kinds of links to get in touch with you. And again, follow The Accidental Entrepreneur on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and soon coming Amazon. I'm Mitch Beinhacker. Enjoy the day and have a great holiday weekend.